Will Goldstein here. It's probably my last video on Spinoza. So it's number 3. Spinoza on the control of the emotions, subtitle War of the Emotions. So look, opportunity down there in that right hand corner to subscribe. I might get more people to come. I think I'm up somewhere around 2,000 views now, but it might get more people to come if more people subscribe. So anyway, the impotence of man to govern or restrain the emotions, Spinoza calls bondage. And a man who is under their control is not his own master. So he's being mastered by fortune. He uses the word fortune or fate. For example, fortune or fate can bring good or evil. Okay. So, or even good or evil passions that could be coming upon him or her. So, that's a word about Spinoza. Spinoza is very difficult to read. He's extremely repetitive. His language is often, sometimes you have to read it several times. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. He also has a very naturalistic approach to emotions rather than a spiritual approach to the emotions, at least from my point of view. And so his concepts of good and evil and necessity, but I do think are, different. So he was even banned for a long time from reading because people would read it and go, whoa. That's mainly from a spiritual sense or a Christian sense. But anyway, I do think he has some interesting things to say in dealing with emotions, and as long as they're interpreted or in a spiritual sense, they can be very useful. So perfection and imperfection, according to Spinoza, are really just modes of thought. So nature doesn't commit any errors. This you may look at it and go, well, this is perfect and this is not. This is just nature. That's what he's saying. It doesn't commit any errors. So nothing belongs to nature accepting that which follows from necessity. That's what I just said. So the nature of the efficient causes and whatever follows from these necessity of these efficient causes, it necessarily is going to happen. Okay, so everything just is, and that's the way nature is. It's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always going to be. Okay, so by good, he understands a means by which we can approach nearer and nearer to the model of human nature that's set before us. That's his definition of good. But he uses the word a model set before us. So in other words, whatever we interpret to be good, that is good. Evil, I understand everything that hinders us from reaching that model. So whatever that model is, it's good is going to help you get there, and evil is going to hinder you from doing that. In a spiritual sense, that could be very twisted. In other words, somebody could, people who are evil call evil good. So, you could use it in a very conflicted way. So anyway, men are less perfect or perfect or less perfect as they approach that model. And so they're passing from a less to a greater perfection or vice versa. And so that process, there's a change that's taking place. And we conceive that as his power of action that's happening. And it's understood to be within his own nature. It's being increased or diminished. So perfection, he understands, is an essence of any object insofar as it exists in a certain manner. So by good, he understands again whatever is useful to us. That's good. Okay, so it's not about morality, or it's not about good and evil or wickedness or love or hate. It's all what is useful to us. Okay, so by evil he understands that whatever hinders us from possessing what I guess we consider good. So by contrary emotions, in a very naturalistic sense, this is true. If you just completely take spirituality out of the picture, he's not telling you lies there. So by contrary emotions, those emotions draw a man in different directions, and by the end. By the end, or the sake for which we do anything, he understands that to be appetite. Before, he's equivalated appetite with desire. So by virtue and power, it's related to man and the nature of man, insofar as it has the power of affecting certain things through the laws of nature. So notice he says but he used the word virtue. Power is fine, but virtue, again, he's equating virtue and power with the same thing from a spiritual sense. They're not the same thing, okay? Or at least from a Christian perspective, they're not the same. So no individual thing in nature is not surpassed in strength and power by some other thing, and by which it can be destroyed. Okay, so there's a power struggle. So everything in nature, there's something stronger than it. So that's why I subtitled this "The War of the Emotions," because it's just a power struggle. Okay, so power, by which man is preserving their being, comes from the actual power of God or nature. Okay, he says it's part of his essence. So this would be more like pantheism. He says it's part of his essence. I would say what man's being flows from God's essence. Okay, so we are from God and created by God, but we do not have the essence of God. So this is one of the things that some people have condemned him for pantheistic interpretations. Okay, so, and it's pretty obvious why. It's possible that man could suffer no changes. Then it would be possible that he would not perish and he would exist forever. Okay, so, or may result from the infinite power of nature, that man could suffer no changes, but those tending to his preservations. Meaning, if he did suffer changes, he could still last forever if those changes were tending to his self-preservation. So there's two thoughts in there. Man is necessarily always subject to passions, just going to happen, and it's just he obeys the order of nature, and the force and increase of any passions are limited by the power of an external cause, or compared with our own power. Again, the war of that force, within us and against us. What he's often really talking about is the war between the mind and the body. So the mind and the body together producing these emotions, and the mind alone is over here going, what's happening in my body? And there's this war going on. I think that's a lot of what he's really saying. So now we're getting into the control of the emotions. And emotion in the mind is an idea. and the mind is affirming a greater or lesser power of existence for its body than it possessed before. Okay, so the mind is agitated, and at the same time is agitated by an emotion of the body, at the same time is affected by emotion, by a modification that is increased or diminished. Okay, so there's a power which cannot be restrained or removed unless by modification contrary to the first and stronger than it. Okay, so again, this war going on. The stronger emotion will exclude the existence and remove it. The emotion cannot be restrained nor removed unless opposed by a stronger emotion. Okay? Again, you have this idea of this war of emotions, and they're all just in conflict, and which one's going to win? The force and any passion and its perseverance in existence are limited by the power of the external cause compared with our own power. So I think what he means by our own power is our mind. And therefore, our power of a man may be surpassed by force. Some passion or emotion may obstinately cling to him. So, in other words, you want to get rid of this emotion and you're stuck with it. It's clinging to you because you can't overpower it. And that emotion is kind of conflict with the desires of your mind. Okay? So, an emotion is an idea the mind affirms its greater or less power of existence than in the body that it possessed before. Okay, so it's a change in status of your mind and your body. Okay, that's what's happening with the emotion. Okay, so desire springs from understanding. So far as we act, the strength and increase is limited by human power alone. Desires spring from the emotions by which we are agitated and are greater, and therefore their strength and increase must be limited by the power of external causes, a power compared with our own which surpasses it. Desire, the essence of man. It's an effort by man just strives to preserve his own being. Desire springs from joy, and by that emotion is assisted or increased. And if it springs from sorrow, by that emotion, it's lessened or restrained. And the force of the desire which springs from joy is limited by the human power, but together with the power of the external cause which bring about the sorrow. So they're together. The joy and the sorrow are together. You want this and you've got that, and they're all limited and warring with one another. So I just kind of wrote this little thing here down like a little code that I wrote out. So man has hope, and out of this hope there comes a desire, and the desire for this brings joy, and of course then you want this because you want the joy, but he's limited by the external causes. You want something, but there's things that are keeping you from having it. Okay? So the opposite of that would be in terms of using man progressing to hope, which is what he wants, in terms of man progressing to fear, which he doesn't want. Man is fearful, and this is bringing sorrow, and he's limited by himself to overcome these fears because of the external force that's working against him. Okay? So now we're into imagination, his section on imagination. So the imagination is an idea by which the mind contemplates an object as present. So I'll say that again. Imagination is an idea by which the mind contemplates an object is present, which indicates the constitution of the human body. Okay, so the imagination increases in intensity as proportion as we imagine the present existence of this object. So he's talking about the intensity of the imagination. And the more we imagine its presence, the greater it's going to be. If we imagine the cause of the emotion to be actually present with us, the emotion will be intenser and stronger than if we imagine that it's not there. So that's his interesting way of thinking about imagination. So, and you're imagining something probably that you desire. Okay, so the desire can be easily extinguished or restrained insofar as this knowledge is connected with the future. And this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. By this, the desire of things that are present, because the desire of things that are present are sweet. Okay? I mean, don't know have much more to say about that. Insofar as we imagine any object necessary, we affirm its existence. So we need it, it must exist. Okay, therefore the emotion towards an object we imagine is necessary is stronger towards an object that is possible, contingent, or not necessary. So our emotions are connected with what we really need. We know we need it, as opposed to it's only possible, or it's contingent, it may or may not happen, or it's not even necessary. So where our emotions are connected with what we deem to be necessary. As far as we imagine an object is contingent, we imagine some things that are excluding its presence, existence. If it's contingent and it's not, then it's not happening, well, there must be something keeping it from happening. So, but insofar as we imagine an object, the future to be possible, we imagine some things that make its existence possible. Okay, so, and this fosters hope or fear towards the object, which does not exist in the present. We imagine as being possible. So notice the hope or fear. So something's going to happen. We're either hope it's going to happen or are fearful for this going to happen. Is it going to happen? Is it contingent? Is it necessary to happen? Is it not necessary to happen? So the emotions towards an object we imagine to exist in the present are stronger if we imagine the future at a greater distance from the present time. So you're thinking about something you want. Maybe you're in love with someone and you don't have that person. Oh, in the future, you're dreaming about maybe this will happen in the future someday. The emotion we imagine for a long time is feebler if we imagine it as in the present. So in other words, it's in the current state, it's much weaker in the present than if we imagine what's going to happen in the future. We're in our state now, and that's very weak. But if we imagine we're looking into the future, and it's much stronger in the future when what we want is really happening. So if we imagine as contingent, the emotion towards a contingent object is feebler than if we imagine the object to be present to us. So if we can imagine it's really going to happen, that's stronger than if we imagine it might happen. Okay, that's what he's really going with. As far as we imagine an object as contingent, we imagine certain things that exclude its present existence. So insofar as we imagine its relationship to the past and our memory, okay, and this causes us to contemplate it as present. So if it's already happened before, we're contemplating it now as present. The emotion towards a contingent we know does not exist, will be weaker than the emotion towards a past. So in other words, if something's already happened, we have emotion towards reality, what happened, towards something that may or may not happen. If you have any idea how difficult this is to just wing it and make this happen, men are more strongly influenced by an opinion than by true reason. So true knowledge of good and evil gives way to every kind of lust. So this is just the reality that there's good and evil in the world, and it's giving way to every kind of lust. And then he's quoting the preacher. He doesn't identify the preacher. I'm thinking it's Solomon, because I think this is the words of Solomon. I didn't look it up, but he that increases knowledge increases sorrow. But it may be, I think it's probably Solomon. And then he says, I say this not because it would be understood to conclude it is better to be ignorant than to be wise, and I'm leaving out, I'm not giving you all of this, but it's necessary for us to know the strength and weakness of our nature, so that we may determine what reason is able to do and what it cannot do in governing our emotions. So in other words, the conclusion that Spinoza is making is right there in the end, and I'm bringing it. Let me just say that we may determine what reason or reason and logic can and cannot do in governing our emotions, the war of goings on us. So how much can reason really do? So in this naturalistic sense. So in a very naturalistic sense, this is all very true. If you don't have God to assist you, there's only so much you can do in this war that's going on in your mind. Okay? So his conclusion, and I'm just writing what I think about his conclusions, Spinoza's conclusion is that by the power of nature alone, man is limited in controlling his emotions. That's basically what he just said. He's not even advocating, that it's better to be wise than not wise. It's just that whatever you want out of life, it's, you're limited in your emotions. Okay? Now, in my response to that, I would suggest that by the presence of the Holy Spirit and sound reason, which he used the word reason, we're limited. He's saying reason can help you, but you're only limited. I would suggest that by the combination of sound of the Holy Spirit within us, leading us to reason, that there is hope for controlling your emotions. Thank you very much for listening to this. If you made it to the end, don't forget to subscribe. And again, as far as Spinoza goes, he can be very difficult to read. He's extremely repetitive. The language that he uses, the way he presents things, it's kind of like working your way through a minefield. And me just looking at what he's written and trying to say it out, I hope I did a reasonable job at expressing that. Believe me, if you try to read it yourself, you would really go through. I tried to clarify it, so it's very difficult. Sometimes, like I said, you have to read it several times. But if you are interested, and there's probably lots of books by Spinoza, this is the book that I'm using, the Philosophy of Spinoza, Special Edition, Baruch Spinoza. It's, anyway. So, El Paso Norte Press is this book. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and do the best you can. And I would suggest, with the power of the Holy Spirit within you, that you can learn how, to a great extent, to control your emotions as He assists you in that endeavor.